Well, good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Brianna Lyman joins us from the Federalist at 3:30. She'll talk about the aftermath of the Daniel Penny verdict yesterday and what it tells us about the left's most radical elements. Mike in Ganamort joins us at 4 o'clock. That name may sound familiar to you. He's an assemblyman from New Jersey. And perhaps more importantly for our program, the brother to our producer, Corey in Ganamort. Mike will join us to discuss the drones that are hovering over his New Jersey town and the effort that he's undertaking to get to the bottom of it. Ashley Hinson, the congresswoman, here at 4:30. She talks to us about Mayor Muriel Bowser's testimony today before Congress. And Bobby Burak, 5 o'clock from Outkick, as the left defends Luigi Mangione, the assassin captured in a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania yesterday. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Boy, we know a lot about this Luigi character, don't we? A lot. All of a sudden, mountains of information coming out about him and his circumstances, the health of his family, his own health situation. He went off the radar a couple months ago. Nobody knows where he is. He's got family members who are messaging him, asking him, are you okay? Where are you? Friends looking for him. And then he pops up in what appears to be a video of him assassinating the head of United Healthcare, CEO, this past week. And then he's captured in Altoona, Pennsylvania after a nationwide manhunt spurred on by the NYPD sharing photos of him, captured at all sorts of places, from hostels to public cameras, and boom, he's in custody. And as you may have heard just a moment ago, here he is today screaming as he's being moved from a police cruiser inside of a building in Pennsylvania.
Oh my God! That's completely out of touch, and it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
Completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience. Lived experience is a bit of a tell. That is a very sort of, that's like the kind of thing AOC would say. Lived experience, right? That's an AOC phrase. Well, we have to reflect on your lived experience. You have to live my truth. That's the kind of language that the left uses for sure. Lived experience. Yeah, and we also know a lot about, his bio. The Mangione family. Apparently very prominent in Maryland. They own a whole bunch of things. They've got real estate. They've got a radio station. One of the family members is an elected official in Maryland. A pretty high-profile family, well-to-do family. And one of their relatives is now accused of cold-blooded murder in the streets of New York. And in fact, in addition, another piece we've learned, we knew this yesterday, is that he attended the Gilman School. This is an all-boys elite prep school in Baltimore. He attended the Gilman School, and the local Fox affiliate in Baltimore, Fox Baltimore, was attempting to do a stand-up report. This reporter's name is Shannon Lilly, and she was standing outside of the Gilman School just talking about the local connection that the shooter had. And what's amazing about this clip is, I guess the locals don't want her filming the school and portraying it in this way or even connecting the shooter to the school. So there's a dude with a leaf blower behind her trying to disrupt the entire broadcast.
Hey, good morning, guys. Yeah, first let's talk about the community reaction to all of this. As you can hear behind me, there is certainly some hostility to even the fact that media is covering this story. So you can see this leaf blower behind me has told us that he will not leave until we do.
So a guy gets out there with a gas-powered leaf blower. It's a backpack leaf blower. He's going to run it right next to the Fox camera while they try and just do a basic report on the local impact of this story. And it's difficult to do that when there's a leaf blower going off right next to the microphone in front of the camera. And we also know, what else do we know about Luigi Mangione? Well, we've learned about his sex life. Yeah, his sex life. The Daily Mail has a report. Brian Thompson shooting suspect Luigi Mangione suffered a back injury so severe he was unable to have sex, a former roommate said. R.J. Martin lived with the murdered defendant for 6 months at a Hawaii co-living space and told the New York Times about 26-year-old Mangione's secret agony. Quote, He knew that dating and being physically intimate with his back condition wasn't possible, Mr. Martin told The Times. I remember him telling me that, and my heart just breaks. Explaining the injury that Mangione had suffered after a back condition called spondylolisthesis was worsened by a surfing accident, Martin said. His spine was kind of misaligned. He said his lower vertebrae were almost like a half-inch off, and I think it pinched a nerve. Martin told CNN that Mangione, who he described as a bright engineer, suffered from debilitating pain through his 6-month stay at Surf Break during 2022. He said a single surf lesson left Mangione in bed for a week afterwards, adding, "It was really traumatic and difficult, when you're in your early 20s and you can't, do some basic things." Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge. He didn't say that, but that's what he means. So we know the intimate details of his sex life or lack thereof while he's recovering from his back pain and his back surgery. That's remarkable. Why don't we know anything about Thomas Crooks? He's the man who shot Donald Trump in the head. Why don't we know anything about him? He died on that roof, shot by a Secret Service sniper eventually. We don't know anything about Thomas Crooks. We know everything about Luigi Mangione. You will have his blood type by the end of the day. But Thomas Crooks? Nothing. Ryan Routhe is still alive. He's the man who also attempted to assassinate Donald Trump. We know almost nothing about him. We know he went to Ukraine a lot. We also know, thanks to some court filings, that he owned 11 cell phones. Who owns 11 cell phones? What could you possibly need 11 cell phones for? 11? They found a bunch in the car, and they found a lot more at his house. 11 cell phones. He had a bunch of license plates in the vehicle. Multiple license plates. Huh. And so is that it? We also know he communicated with some major news outlets who were all very quick to tell us, I once talked to this guy, but that was it. So why do I know so much more about Luigi Mangione right now than I do Thomas Crooks or Ryan Routhe? What about the Las Vegas shooter, Stephen Paddock? What about that guy? Isn't it crazy that case was opened and then closed by the FBI, and they're like, well, I guess we'll never get to the bottom of it. The single deadliest shooting in American history. We'll never get to the bottom of it. That's where we leave it. Stephen Paddock? What was that? What about the Tranifesto? What about Audrey Hale, the Nashville shooter? The girl who opened fire on a school full of Christians. It was pulling teeth. It was like pulling teeth to get access to the Tranifesto, which, of course, confirmed everything we feared, which was that it was a targeted shooting of Christians and that it was motivated by radical transgender ideology. But again, not much curiosity from the press on that subject. They're not trying to edify you in terms of helping you understand even more. The same was true of James Hodgkinson. Remember him? You probably remember his name. If you can place the shooting, an extra point to you. He's the man who opened fire on that Alexandria baseball field against all of those members of Congress, grievously wounding Steve Scalise. That was James Hodgkinson. A lot of people don't remember this, but, inside of his pocket, after they came to his body, it was thanks to Capitol police officers who were there. They gunned him down. On his body, they found in his pocket a list of Republican congressmen, a list of names of Republican congressmen. He had specifically sought to target Republicans. In fact, as he was walking up to the field, it was then Congressman Ron DeSantis who was actually walking away from the field, and some random passerby had asked, it was James Hodgkinson, had asked him, what party is that on the field? He said, it's Republicans. They're just practicing. And DeSantis left. Hodgkinson took that as an invitation to open fire. Went back to his gun. His car got the gun and lined up on the third baseline and began opening fire on the field. But other than knowing that he was a Bernie Sanders campaign volunteer, we almost learned nothing about him. So anyway, this is just a way of saying that it's kind of fascinating that we know so much about Luigi Mangione this quickly and so little about so many other people who have had such big impacts on American history and have looked to inalterably change the course of American history. They wanted to assassinate Donald Trump, now the incoming president of the United States and the former President of the United States. And so today we're still just getting a torrent of coverage of Luigi Mangione. McDonald's, that's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where a McDonald's staffer, apparently, one of the employees there, had recognized Luigi and called the local Altoona police. Altoona cops show up, take him into custody. And a McDonald's customer was returned, I guess, to the store to do some interviews with media and talked about what he witnessed.
A group of us are here every day, and one of my friends, and I thought he was kidding, when the shooter, I'm assuming was the shooter who they made the arrest on, came in, he made a comment, "Well, that looks like the shooter from New York." But I thought the group of us, I thought it was more of a joke, and we were kidding about it. But then, as it turned out, it was him. And like I said, the employee that thought it was him that, I guess, started the initial investigation on it. I talked to her later. I said, "Was I here when he came in?" And she goes, "Yeah." And she goes, "Actually, you and your friends and all were making a joke, almost like saying, you know." And that's pretty much about it. I mean, he ordered, went to the rear of the store and sat. I passed him whenever I left. I left and went to church, come back, because I heard there was an arrest. I didn't know which McDonald's it was, but it was this, where we were at. I think I looked at the guy, but his back was to me. He did have a backpack, but my friend Mike that said this, I asked him again this morning. I said, "Were you kidding or not?" He said, "No, I was serious." He goes, "The backpack, the jacket, resembled the one he said the day of the shooting."
So he's wearing the same kind of clothes, or the same clothes exactly? What kind of getaway is this? And he was carrying the weapon on him. He was carrying his manifesto. I guess he was perfectly content. He was like, "Well, I'll just get a meal at McDonald's and wait for the cops to show up." Yeah. There's also the deranged reaction of the left here. Among them, a now former Washington Post writer called Taylor Lorenz. Her job was to apparently cover the internet, to write stories about the internet. And she's always getting into fights with everybody. And she always seemed very emotionally distraught. She claims to have long COVID, I think, and is perpetually angry at everybody for not living their world in a cocoon, like in bubble wrap. She was on Piers Morgan's show. It's called Piers Morgan Uncensored, I believe. And Taylor said that when she saw the execution of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, she was filled with joy. This is a recent Washington Post employee. Here she is.
I do believe in the sanctity of life, and I think that's why I felt, along with so many other Americans, joy, unfortunately, because it feels like...
Serious?
I mean...
Joy at a man's execution?
Maybe not joy, but certainly not empathy. Because again,
we're watching the footage. How can this make you joyful? This guy's a husband, he's a father, and he's being gunned down in the middle of Manhattan. Why does that make you joyful?
Thousands of Americans that he murdered. So are the tens of thousands of Americans, innocent Americans, who died because greedy health insurance executives like this one push policies of denying care to the most vulnerable people.
She said she felt joy that he was gunned down. Joy. And Piers correctly points out that, what? How can you say that? This is a father. You feel joy that he was gunned down? Civilization is collapsing if you have assassinations in the street and you support them and you have people enthusiastically supporting them, and the left is. It's crazy. All right, some breaking news this afternoon. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell apparently wiped out at the Senate Republican conference lunch today. He is 82 years old. EMTs had to respond to his fall, the New York Post reports. Remember, he fractured a rib and had a concussion after a fall last year that led to his hospitalization. And McConnell's office has now released a short statement on the subject. They say Leader McConnell tripped following lunch. He sustained a minor cut to the face, and he sprained his wrist. Well, that's not good. A cut to the face and a sprained wrist. He's been cleared to resume his schedule. Oh, my gosh. He's been cleared? So he can just walk around some more. Why doesn't he retire? Why don't they get rid of him? It's time for McConnell to go. McConnell, very much like Joe Biden, is in no position to keep doing this. It's not an age thing, although, of course, age is a corollary here. It's literally senility and frailty. He can't do it. He can't walk across a room. His injury was not sustained, in like playing basketball or something. He was walking from lunch, and he tripped, and now he has a cut on his face and a sprained wrist. To go along with all the other health concerns we have about Mitch McConnell, the guy is freezing up as he speaks to the public. He'll stand at a lectern. He'll lose track of everything. And then people will come up to him and say, sir, are you okay? Frozen for a full minute. It's time to go, Senator. It's time to go. I love what you did with the judges, but it's time to go. Coming up, Brianna Lyman will be with us. She's with the Federalist. She talks to us about the left's most radical elements and how they appear to have been beaten into submission by reality. That update ahead. Hey, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we'll be joined by Assemblyman from New Jersey, Mike in Ganamort. His town is covered in mysterious drones. They say the size of small buses. Well, that's a huge drone. Where are they from? No one knows. We'll talk to Assemblyman in Ganamort coming up at 4. Ashley Hinson, Congresswoman from Iowa, joins us at 4:30 today. She was questioning D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser about the affairs of the district today. And then Bobby Burak over at Outkick joins us at 5 o'clock. As we're learning more about this assassin of the United Healthcare CEO and the left feeling joy over the death of a human being, of a father, and then salivating over the photos of the. You see these stories? They think that the assassin is very handsome, so they're very excited about that. Sick people. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630 WMAL. Among the good news items this week, Daniel Penny had charges dropped and then was found not guilty yesterday by a New York jury after a trial and deliberation that went on far too long for a guy who stood up for New Yorkers on that subway train when a mentally ill man threatened to hurt everybody on the train. The guy had a long criminal history of literally punching people in the face, breaking women's noses and their orbital bones. And then he arrived on that train. And Daniel Penny was apparently the first guy to finally stand up to him. And as a result was taken to this trial in which a jury found him not guilty of either negligent homicide or manslaughter. Joining us now to discuss that and specifically the left's reaction to all of this is Brianna Lyman. She's an elections correspondent for the Federalist, and she's got a new column up. The Daniel Penny verdict is a signal that the BLM era is over. Brianna, good to have you with us.
Vince, thanks for having me.
Okay, so BLM caused so much chaos back in the summer, especially in the summer of 2020. And in the years that followed, it seemed like that organization, to the extent that you can call it that, had a kind of a negative consequence on the United States of America for all Americans, black and white included. But they've been relatively quiet lately. What's going on?
Yeah, well, Vince, it was actually the summer of love, not the summer of riots.
Yep.
I think what we saw yesterday is prior to the verdict being announced, Daniel Penny's lawyers moved to have the trial dismissed because they could hear from inside the courthouse chants from activists outside who were screaming things like, no justice, no peace, Daniel Penny, subway strangler. And nonetheless, the unanimous jury came back. They did not buckle under the pressure of what could only be described as intimidation tactics. And instead, they let Daniel Penny walk free because he deserved to be free. And I think that right there sends a message that the intimidation tactics that Black Lives Matter has used over the past few years, whether it's threatening, no peace, threatening violence, looting, actually following through on those threats,
yes.
People no longer want to live in America where you have mob mentality over justice.
Also, to what extent does the media and losing credibility play a role here? Because in the past, it seemed like it was the press that was very much responsible for inflaming a lot of this chaos. And even in this Daniel Penny, Jordan Neely situation, the media described Jordan Neely as nothing more than a Michael Jackson impersonator. But the reality is that Jordan Neely is a career criminal who had assaulted many New Yorkers, to include the faces of women that he punched and broke. And yet that didn't seem to come up in the coverage. Do you think that that people are just not paying attention to the legacy media quite so much?
Absolutely. And, we've seen this now. It's been a trajectory ever since, I think, the beginning of this year, where they've tuned out in terms of the election. They're also tuning out in terms of your everyday news because people can no longer trust the spin. New York Times, they had several reports on this Daniel Penny thing, and they described Jordan Neely as someone who just strode onto the subway and was yelling at passengers. And that's a deliberate choice of language because they're trying to obscure the fact that he wasn't just yelling. He was saying, I'm going to kill everybody. He was threatening to create harm. And they do that because it doesn't help their narrative to say Jordan Neely came on the train and was threatening to kill everybody, so a man stepped up and subdued him. They use the word chokehold. Chokehold is supposed to elicit, this must be illegal, because you think Eric Garner, especially if you're a New Yorker and you remember that case. Subduing Jordan Neely is not the same as putting this man in a chokehold. He subdued him and let him go once he realized, okay, this man is no longer a threat. I have other people helping me.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's what the witnesses testified to in that trial as well, which is, of course, why the jury came to that conclusion. Kind of fascinating. Now, this didn't slow down the activists who were outside the building. In fact, they became even more angry and were seeking actual violent retribution as a result. Here's a guy called Hawk Newsom, who is known as a BLM leader, and yesterday he was calling for black vigilantes to kill white people as a result.
Just like everybody else has vigilantes, we need some black vigilantes.
That's right.
People want to jump up and choke us and kill us for being loud. How about we do the same when they attempt to oppress us?
Right.
I'm tired.
Yeah, he called for violence yesterday, to which Harris Faulkner over on the Fox News Channel responded to some of these calls for violence this way.
When you say that you want to burn stuff, that affects everybody, and you're going to hinge because you think people who have my skin color are so hated in America that you got to set New York on fire. That puts everybody in victim mode. I mean, how is that even tolerated? Where is Alvin Bragg? He should come out on the steps of the courthouse right now and say, you will be protected. Justice has been adjudicated in this building. You will not riot tonight. We will come after people who do. Like, where is his voice?
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic question. Brianna Lyman, where's Alvin Bragg to tell the people of New York, no matter their feelings on this trial, that they need to respect the jury and its verdict?
He's probably sitting in his office looking through the law books trying to find a crime he can pin on a Republican or a white man who defends a bunch of subway riders, because that's what Alvin Bragg's MO has been. Yeah. It has never been about justice. It has been purely political persecution, not prosecution. And when we talk about these people going out and rioting, look, at the end of the day, Daniel Penny protected the lives of people who weren't just white on that subway. There were Hispanic women. I believe I read somewhere there might have been a black. Like, there were people of every race and creed on that subway. Yes. He didn't do it because it was just a black man. He was protecting everyone. So if Black Lives Matter cares about black people and minorities, they would be thanking Daniel Penny for preventing what could have been, God forbid, a tragedy.
Yes. As a man comes on a train with a history of punching people in the face and hurting them and saying he's going to kill someone, he doesn't care if he goes to prison, Daniel Penny responded in kind. So the people who were calling for violence yesterday, and it wasn't just Hawk Newsom, there were several people who were calling for violence in the wake of the verdict. I noticed that I didn't see a bunch of headlines of destruction and damage out of New York overnight. Perhaps I missed them. But my sense is that this hysteric sort of dangerous response is not being treated all that seriously anymore.
Exactly. I saw a few videos. There were, people marching, which is they're within their right. They can go and they march and they can scream. But this is why it signals the end of Black Lives Matter. If this had happened in 2020, especially during the time of the George Floyd riots, I think we would have seen a horrific response from these left-wing activists. But the reason we're not is because people have had enough, again, bowing down to the mob mentality and intimidation tactics. They're tired of being told that if there's a white person and a black person involved in the altercation, the white person is automatically guilty because of racial-based grievances. People are rejecting that, and I think in large part it has to do with someone like Donald Trump, who's saying, guys, stop, enough with the talk about race. Let's focus on one common thing. We're all Americans. And when people start thinking in that mindset of I'm an American, not I'm white or I'm black, that helps push you away from the race-based or gender-based grievances that the left has to focus on in order to have a message.
But you do wonder how long it's going to take for places like, say, MSNBC to get the message that open racism is not allowed. So MSNBC employs a woman called Joy Reid, who people are familiar with probably through the insane clips that are often played on conservative media. Here's another example of that in reaction to the verdict yesterday.
Never mind that Daniel Penny has not, at least as of now, volunteered to be the right's next George Zimmerman or Kyle Rittenhouse, two vigilante heroes of the right who are beloved and famous among Republicans solely for killing people who they believe need killing and getting acquitted for it at trial. Armed conservative must be heavily armed and empowered to kill at will with your handgun, your AR-15, or even with your bare hands. Anyone who makes you feel threatened or uncomfortable anywhere, anytime, at your front door, in your driveway, driving by a Black Lives Matter rally, on the terrifying, scary, black man-filled New York subway. And the people who tend to need killing just happen to be black or brown or suffering from mental health crises or white, but just a little too cozy with BLM. And killing them is not just your right, Republican citizen. Doing it makes you a hero.
Is there an end, do you think, to that kind of commentary, or does that just keep getting worse, Brianna Lyman? Like, at some point, does the company that employs her say, you know what, this is too much. She's way too racially prejudiced. She should not be on the air. This is insane.
I think it'll become too much for them when people, I'm not a lawyer, but that to me sounds like defamation, the way she speaks about Daniel Penny and the others, people who have been found not guilty in a court of law by the jury of their peers. So once it starts hitting MSNBC's bottom line, I think you'll see some kind of punishment for Joy Reid for spreading false accusations and smearing people and maligning people. But, Joy Reid, think about the main claim she makes. How dare Daniel Penny feel scared and take action when a man gets on the subway saying, I'm going to kill all of you? How dare he? He's supposed to cede his right to safety because he is white. That is the message that she is sending.
And if she was sitting on that train next to Daniel Penny, she'd be really grateful that he stood up and did something about it. She'd be relieved to no end. And in fact, if he had started hurting people on the train, she'd be the first one saying, where was the man to stand up? Where was the guy who could have protected this train? It's preposterous. But I do find some hope in the fact that I think fewer and fewer people are taking people like Joy Reid seriously, and that on net is a benefit to the country.
I agree. Vince, I'll tell you, the first thing I do when I get on public transportation, I'm not going to lie, I do look around and I see, is there someone on here that would protect me? I'm a young woman. I'm not strong. Is there someone that, God forbid, in case of emergency, I could look to? And I don't think you're going to see that now because people will think twice because they don't want the Daniel Penny treatment if they stand up in the face of injustice.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, we had Batia Ungar Sargon on yesterday. She's like, God gave you testosterone for a reason. It wasn't just to take it to the gym, which I think is a good point. Hey, Brianna Lyman, thank you very much. Please keep up the great work as always.
Thanks, Vince.
That's Brianna Lyman from the Federalist. Her column this week, the Daniel Penny verdict is a signal that the BLM era is over, God willing. Over on CNN last night, Scott Jennings was trying to carefully walk the lefty audience through the reality of the day's events and said, Daniel Penny is the hero in this tale. It's a good thing that he was acquitted. And here's how that went. This is you'll hear audio here. This is Scott Jennings and Solomon Jones from the Philadelphia Inquirer is jumping in here.
That Daniel Penny should get the Congressional Gold Medal to recognize his heroism. I'm not asking you about anyone else.
I think he ought to get medal. I think they ought to build a statue to this guy in New York City.
I think that race, and I'm going to say it. I'm going to say the dreaded R word. Race plays a role in this. right? And so we see it. Yes, absolutely, because statistics say that.
Wasn't there a similar case in New York City at the same time this one was going on?
That when people kill people who are white, they tend to get harsher sentences, especially if they're people of color.
What about the Jordan Williams case?
That is what happens in our criminal justice system.
First of all,
no, I'm not going to stop because race absolutely plays a role in this.
I said, what about the Jordan Williams case here in New York? Same situation, African-American, gets on a subway, ends up killing a guy, grand jury tosses it out at the exact same time as the Penny case.
What about Bernard?
Yeah, he's talking Jordan Williams. This story, this goes back to 2023. Charges were dropped against a New York City man accused in a fatal subway stabbing, NBC reported at the time. Jordan Williams, the 20-year-old man who was accused of fatally stabbing a New York City subway rider, will avoid prosecution, city officials said Wednesday. A grand jury declined to indict Williams on manslaughter and weapons charges in connection with the deadly stabbing of DeVictor Wedraogo, 36, on a Brooklyn J train on June 13th. Wedraogo was alleged to have punched Williams' girlfriend and harassed other passengers. Now, Williams, I should point out, to the point that Scott Jennings is making, is a black man. He responded to the assault by stabbing the assailant. And the jury they declined to pursue charges against him. The charges were dropped against him. And so Scott Jennings is, as he so often does, introducing facts to a conversation where the left is leading with hysterics and emotions. But what? This never happens. A black man stood up for his girlfriend, defended her, and the charges were dropped against him, Scott Jennings describes. Meanwhile, Daniel Penny stands up for an entire train and was on the verge of losing his liberty forever this week. And thankfully, that jury came up with a better decision. AOC is another one of these lefties who says deranged things on social media, but if a crisis were to happen in front of her, she'd be looking around the room for the nearest man to protect her. There's no question about that. I mean, heck, on January 6th, she thought she was going to be murdered. She wasn't even in the Capitol building. She was cowering in a congressional office blocks away, or at least that's her version of events.